In the last video, you got a basic introduction to the customer select, the icons, and the basic arrangement for the add record, the ID, and adding information for both the primary contact and the company information. Next, we're going to be covering the user-defined fields, the equipment assignment, equipment status, and the service information. We'll follow up with the next video where we'll go in and look at the billing, payment, location, and all this information above here. So let's start. The basic overview for this screen is that it's a consolidated screen where a lot of information for the customer and customer data and also service and equipment is all stuck in this one screen area. That's a benefit in that you don't have to change a lot of screens in order to find the information that you're looking for. You basically have the primary client, the business, the notes about the particular business or client, the UDF fields that when you provide a title for a field and then do an input, that gives you the ability to have 3 different inputs per row and an infinite number of information items added in this area. What that basically does, it gives you the ability to manage information that is not included in this area that is relevant to the people in this list. So as you work your way down through the adding data and you get to a point where you find that there's things that are not going to be applicable to a message, but you want to still be able to look at them over here and then also go to the portal by clicking on the green arrow. There you would find the information to go ahead and follow up with as far as textual field in there where you can search on all the records using the portal data that's in these 2 rows, either looking at the title or the data that was added in there to see how many records match, or just looking at different records to see what types of inputs you have in there by doing a search for random words. Okay, that's what the UDF or user-defined fields are used for. The next thing we're going to look at is the equipment assignment. Now, when you were back in the calendar, the main calendar, over here, when you click on this, this is the main calendar. When you're in the main calendar, you saw the equipment assignment. Basically, when you come from the calendar to this screen, if you're doing a new record, you're going to be adding the contact and the company information first. You can add any more information that is for the UDF fields, but the next thing you're going to do is you're going to add the equipment assignment for this particular record, which is for this client. Now, part of the reason for doing that is you build an inventory of the equipment that you may be working on, either for your own company, by your own record, or outside companies that you're doing business with as far as servicing and maintaining, doing unscheduled and scheduled maintenance. Now, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be adding it to the individual record. In this case, what happens, you see the name, you click on this, and what it'll do is it'll bring up the name and the ID. It'll have a series of icons that you can click on that will take you to other screens that are related directly to this information. A quick equipment listing, equipment report, equipment portal, and the equipment portal list are all things that are related to this equipment. Okay, in this case, you start out in the green field. A green field is a new record in a portal. You can put as many records in here as you need to for the particular client that you're working with. Now, the primary thing you want to do is think about how you're going to add this information. And I kind of did this in 2 different ways to give you an idea. In this case, the description is of a vehicle and its serial number. You can do that, or you can just put the serial number in here and just go with the serial number over here as the end item. Because this is the final thing that you're working on that's coming into you for servicing, it can be a vehicle, or it can be a generator, it could be a crane, it can be any type of rolling stock equipment. It could even be a fixed item like a generator on a pallet. Or it can be just about anything you can imagine that this client wants you to do service on if you have the ability in your company to do that. Now, the same thing goes if you're doing your own company. You could take anything that you want at the end item and put it in here as an item in the list for your company by this contact, and obviously the information by the company within here. Now, over here you're going to see the company name, and that's brought over to you within the client record. It's automatically added, and the date for the record is also put in here. If you had a purchase date when this thing was actually purchased by the client, you would put that in there, and that has some relevance about age and material things. Even though it's a 2009, it might have been purchased in who knows, 2012, 14, or whatever. It gives some kind of an idea to the service techs what kind of service is being done on it and what is the history of the vehicle. The first thing you would do after that is put the equipment name in here. This is going to be used again and again in the assignment of the vehicle and other things. Now, be aware that you have a drop-down list here. If you click on this, what it's going to do, it's going to take you into the equipment inventory area, and this is if you wanted to look for certain parts and availability for different things. You can do a search in here by any field that's in this area in the equipment inventory and services. And it's also in there so that you're looking at things that are related to that particular client. Now, in the do action, which we haven't covered yet, I'll get to that. Basically, you can go ahead and navigate the application within a record. You can find different records by starting a find and performing a find. So if you're looking for a particular thing for parts for a certain vehicle or whatever, or vehicles, you could say, for example, the equipment type. You can go into the equipment type and look up all the types that are in here. Now you can add your own because the header allows you to add any kind of material that you want to as far as the inventory area is concerned. Now understand that the equipment information that you're looking at here is supporting products. They are vehicles you own for your company, customer vehicles, major assemblies, sub-assemblies, repair parts, consumables, and other. Okay, with that known, and this is the inventory, let me go back and point out something. Go back over to customer information. When you're creating a record for this particular customer, you have to understand that you're going to need some repair parts for it. Now you have the option for the customer to supply the parts to you, or you would be purchasing those parts. And when we go back into the inventory system, we're going to be looking for those kind of parts. That record I was just showing you has the ability to show you whether or not that part or piece belongs to your company or the company that you're doing the work for. And that's critical because if you're managing parts, you need to know where they're at, where they're coming from, and who actually is paying for those parts. If the customer is supplying them, then you need to keep track of the parts that you're not going to be billing them for. You'll be billing them for the labor and the services to put them in and test them. Okay, so we go back over here and look at the equipment, and you'll see that. This is the actual truck that you're being sent maybe by, and let's say it's me and I have a company, and this is the company, and I'm the person that's a customer. This is where I actually have the location of the vehicle. In this area, it says equipment location and address. This tells you the finite location in a parking area or warehouse or whatever, or in this case, an actual service address where you can go to it. And the city, state, zip, and also the other information up here is the equipment status and the manufactured by, so that we understand who the maker is. There can be some things, for example, that it looks like a Ford, when somebody looks at it, it looks like Ford 2,000 pound forklift, but really it's a John Deere Incorporated product. So it's not F for Ford, it's a forklift, okay? So you have to be a little aware when you're building this information that you put an ID in this particular field for the end item that makes sense and also has either you can actually put in the VIN or serial number of the end item, or you can have it over here and not put it over in this area. That's your opportunity to make that choice. Okay, the service, now equipment status, this is something that can be edited. For example, these are the statuses that are currently in there right now, and you could stop this video and look at them, or you can come into your own application and then go up here and look at the edit status window, and this is the edit status window. As I told you earlier, you can set your own inputs in here because on the iPad and iPhone you're not allowed to or cannot edit these on the actual iPad or iPhone. Where in here you can add a record and then put that information in the fields. When you do add a record, it'll put it up here, and this is where you actually edit the data. Or if you want to change it, you click on the button on the side over here to edit that data for that row and make the change. Now be aware, and this is true of all the lists like this that are list equipment or any of the other types of lists, that when you modify this list, do not modify a field or data that has already been used in another record. That'll cause confusion for the person or people that are reading the information, and they'll go look for that item and they won't see it in the list. If once you start using this data when you first set up the application and you use it, do not change it. Leave it in there. If you need to modify it slightly, add a new record and have a modified version of that information that you wanted to see in there. Now you have the option to go ahead and click the app menu and go back to customer information, or you can click on equipment services, and we'll show you where that goes. It goes back to the equipment services again. There's a lot of reasons for coming back to the inventory area and going directly to it, and that's why I give you that option from different screens to go back. We're going to go back into the customer information, and now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the equipment status. Now in this case, this is the status of the actual equipment, and you saw two different things in the main calendar, the advanced calendar, where it had the status of the vehicle or vehicles in the screen in there. And this is basically that same screen where you edit in here rather than in the calendar. It tells you that this is the customer ID, the customer, a little bit of information about using this screen. Then what you have in here is you have the information for all the equipment that is in the application as far as end item and the different customers that own the products with their ID, so it's easy to identify who you're talking about here. Then it has a status again, where you can place a status for the equipment for that particular portal on the calendar and also to be used in here. It's important to keep all the information fields filled in, and I purposely left one blank so you can see in here that this is ID number 1, and the information that you're looking for in here is based on the actual client. So go ahead and put this information in the field so that it's there available for you when you need it. That way it fills in all the information. If you leave blanks, that leaves blanks for people to try to figure out what is supposed to be in that field. Currently, you'll see that there's only 4 items in here, but this particular set of fields and information can be very large when it comes down to the information that's in it. It is sorted numerically and then alpha, so that you get all the numbered things first and then go through alphabetically down through the list. So it's easy to scroll and find the information you want based on the alpha or numeric fields that are included in the first field. Okay, you can edit in this screen, but I don't recommend that you do it as far as some of these fields are locked. If they are locked, don't try to change them, because that's the primary record and where that particular client data is coming from. This is not something you want to change in here. It's basically information that is for the individual client. Now, if you had to change it because somebody made a mistake and put it in the wrong place, you can see that there is the actual number here with the ID for the person for that particular client. Now what's going to happen, the actual field when it's selected will not include the ID here in this record, but it is always in the drop down because it's coming directly from the customer records for each individual client. So you would put that in the area if you needed to change it. In this case, you're seeing all the data for that particular set of information, and like before, you have the ability to move between different screens with what I call hot icons, where they can pop right to a field or information that you're looking for, or you can go directly into the portal for that particular record. So if I wanted to hit the portal record, I'm now looking at equipment assignments, and I could see the actual information for that particular record I was viewing and see all the little different things that are in here. Now, one of the things you'll be aware of, if for some reason there's mistakes in this, you can correct them and edit them in here, or you can correct and edit them in the actual main record. But if you're in the portal and you're going to delete the record for whatever the cause is, always delete it in the portal. Do not try to delete it in the main record. Don't try to do that in the actual portal. This is where you would come to do that. There is a button directly alongside of this. If you click on that, it'll take you back to the current customer that you're working with. Now we're working our way down, and what we've done, we also have a next and previous where you can cycle between the different clients. If you're close to another client and you want to see it, like number 2, you go next, and you'd be in the next record when you go down through there. And that's how you cycle through them. Prior record will take you back. Now in that particular case, I'm clicking on next, and there was no next record because I was at the end of the list. But I can go prior, and I go back through the records, and then it'd be right where I wanted to be. You can also do a find. Go up to the find, say start a find. This will rotate and give you all the records that with a magnifying glass on them. Now be aware, you cannot search in a portal on this screen. Only the records that are the active records in the fields, not in portals. So if I'm going to look for something and I want to find it in the screen, what I can do is I can go over here, for example, and you'll see the first place it goes is maybe I want to see the number 3 ID for that particular client that's from this list. All I have to do is perform the find, and you'll see that the number 3 record is now the one that is selected. This is kind of fast in that it allows you to do something to jump to a record from within the list over here, but you can also click on this and it brings records up on whatever one you click, and it's on the name field is where you're going to do that. So that's where you would find them. Or you can go to the list view and go over to the list view and then just click on the record button next to the edge of the record and go back into record 2. So there's a lot of ways to navigate very quickly through the application. Simplification of input is primary in a database, so that's what we're accomplishing here. Okay, we've looked at equipment assignment, equipment status. We already talked about the calendar where you can enter your own data, which is the Google Calendar that comes where you have to have a Wi-Fi connection for that. All this data is based on the database data that you're looking at. If this is on the cloud, you will have to have a cloud connection through Wi-Fi or 3 or 4G or LTE in order to get the data from the cloud. The next thing is we have service. Well, since this is the name of the application, it's all about service. Let's go ahead and take and see what's in here. If you come up into the service screen up here, the first thing you're going to do when you go into the service screen, if you're going to schedule, and this is what this basically is about, equipment service and repair is a scheduled plan thing. You can either have unscheduled or scheduled. What is the difference? Scheduled is where you can reach out in the future and you can say, I have to do something at X number of days, or I have to take so many days to do it. And then what will happen is it'll give you a schedule. Say, for example, I need to go from July 30th and I have to go 90 days. Well, that would be July, August, September, October the 1st. And I'd say, how many days does it need to be in? I'd put 1 in there for the number of days, and it would automatically calculate the day that it comes out. So I would go and maybe I'd say it's going to take me 4 days to do this, and it goes out on the 5th. And of course, you can have any date you want in here. It'll show you the calendar date as it depicts in there as you calculate it in. I'm going to go back, and you can see it just readily goes back. So if it came in on the 1st, it's going to be going out as a due date on the 2nd. We went over here in order to create a record. It'll say lookup list. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to go pick the client record. You know you're in number 2, so you're going to put the number 2 record in here by clicking the number 2 because you want to put the data in for, in this case, the 1907 Flight Inc. for Frank L. Wright. And in this case, go ahead and click on Frank, and that would start a new record in here. Once you create anything in this row, it'll pop up a new blank start record so you can have another record in there. So what we're doing is we're creating an event that will be useful in the calendar so you can look at the main advanced calendar to see anything that you create here, and then you would have another record of that in the calendar as you assign, say for example, somebody to go get that vehicle before the 1st. So that it's in the pool so that you can go ahead and start the work on time, and you know when you're supposed to be going out where you're going to be delivering it back to a client, and that would be probably either on the 2nd or the 3rd depending on when you're going to finish it and have it ready to go back to the client. The next thing you're going to look at is selecting a customer equipment ID, and in this case it's the actual equipment that's coming in that is a part of that record for that client. If you'll notice at the end of this, you'll see that the item has a numeral number 2 at the end of it. That means that that's the client ID for that particular vehicle. So it's very simple to tell the difference between which one of these that you're looking at and also the serial number. He may have a fleet of F100 pickups, and that's why the serial number is so useful at this point. If you had put it into the record in the inventory as far as equipment that's available, it makes it very easy to find it. And there's a slash between the actual nomenclature of the unit and its ID, so it makes it quite easy to find. Okay. Next thing you want to be aware of is that there is a service type. Now service type, I'm going to go ahead and click off and show you. Service type, you can go in here and edit just like we did the other list, and this is pop in and out of that to show you that there is a list here and the information that can be added. Field repairs, outside service, roadside service, and so forth. And you can add whatever you need to in here by adding a new record. So let's go back to customer service. Now in customer service, we're back in service itself. Now keep in mind that this is a planning part where you're planning and scheduling. And over here you have a select service materials. In this particular case, this is the service materials for this particular task for this particular work order that you're working on. Now you can have multiple things on a work order, but you can schedule them so that they occur either on the same day or a following day, and you can do multiple things on one day. Say this takes only 1 hour to do. You can put as many more on that same schedule as you want to be completed on that particular time or date that you're working on. And you're picking the items. Say, for example, I want to get an air cleaner for this guy, and we know what the vehicle is. It's a Ford pickup F-150, and in this particular case, maybe I want to get a fuel filter, and in this case, it says it's a forklift, a 296, but what I'm looking for is the item that I'm looking for as far as the fuel filter. If I don't see it right here, then what I can do is I can jump right up to the equipment list, do a search in the equipment, and find the item that I'm looking for. Okay, and then what you would do is you don't have to necessarily put the item in here if you want to. If you're on a desktop computer, you can click a second time and go ahead and type in something if you need to here. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily coming from the inventory. This may be something where you're doing a test or maybe an evaluation or something like that, and that's not a part. That's not a hard type item. So what you might want to say test the battery, and you could have that as a task that you're doing. And it doesn't have to be an actual thing. And now here's another option you have. You can create records in the inventory system that are labor-based or outside labor things that you can send it out for. So for example, if you brought in an item and you said you're going to be sending out, say, a starter motor to get rebuilt, what you can do is you can say labor, electronics, outside is an item for in the list here, and pick it and then go ahead and show this as an outside labor item that's going to be rebuilding a starter motor. So you can see you have a lot of flexibility in the actual inventory to add things that are not just hard parts, but they are services that can be done from the inventory system. Now, some of those things would not be stuff that you would order. So what you can do is you can always give it a identification that is like this K thing. You could always put outside and then put the nomenclature for the item, so all the outside services will be grouped in one group altogether as far as alphanumeric is concerned. The same thing goes for labor. You could have labor, and it could be labor, and you can set up different types of labor. Like one could be body and paint, another one could be whatever you want it to be. And there are things like Pennzoil. The oil is always, if you're always using Pennzoil, you could have a group of Pennzoils and the different grades so that when you look in the list, they're very easy to find. Okay, so that being said, you can also jump right over to the purchase order in case you have something that is not currently in inventory and you need to order it. You can jump over to the purchase order and order that item. Or you can go to the inventory equipment service report and see the service report to see the service situation on items if you're a manager, to see where they're at as far as the items that you're now currently working on in the shop. Okay, in this screen we also have the order, and this is for the service work order itself. Whereas you do labor on this, this is where you will be capturing the labor. We did not actually charge for materials over here, but what this is going to work within is you're going to see later in the billing how you're going to bill things. In this particular case, this automatically brought over the ID for the record, and that's why it's colored yellow, because you're not going to be able to edit that. It automatically gives you the option to pick the equipment if you need to in this area. This is the person that is doing the labor on the actual item, and as I look at that thing, you can see that he has a description of his thing. He's a service tech, he's a shop tech, he could be a welder, he could be anything, and that's part of when you go over to the service record over here, and that's actually in the employee record. He has his labor rate, he has his position name and the actual name of the person, and he has an ID for that particular person. And then over here you have a portal record for that particular person, where if he has to be in for a certain task that is going to be done in a certain shop, you can actually do scheduling of that employee so that he knows by looking at the schedule where he's supposed to be at a certain date at a certain time and what kind of hours they're expecting him to take to do that work assignment that's over here. And you can always click on the portal to see the portal record with that same information for the employee. I'm going to pop right back over to the customer listing information. You can see how rapidly you can make your way around this application. It's quite easy to do that. It's very simplistic as far as moving. The last one we're going to look at is work order history. In work order history, what this is going to do, as you can read up here at the top, this information is part of the portal. It is used to track the serialized parts that are exchanged for service and repair at the top level equipment. So you're looking at the serial number of the item or something is going to be swapped out that you want to track as far as that information is concerned. The serial number is vital for keeping track of replacement parts. So that one is not going to go out and get put back on something if it's damaged or not usable. And it may be stored in a storage area that got mixed in with maybe equipment that is good. But it also, for the client, if the client provided you a piece of equipment with the vehicle when it came in, and you took it off and you salvaged it or did whatever you did or rebuilt it, this gives you a tracking back to say that this is the serial number that we used, and either we reused the same one or what we did is we went out and found another one in the inventory that had a different serial number, and that's the one we're going to replace it with. And then it has a status, is it installed or whatever, service repaired, adjusted or whatever, and then you have a work status as far as the actual task, and this is the repeat of a lot of the same drop downs that you see for status that you can add and edit in here as far as accomplishing the other things you want to have. There's a work order list view, and if you want to see the work order list view, you go over here, and this is all the work orders that are currently in or completed, and you can see that there's going to be a status on these where it shows awaiting parts or whatever as far as the transaction were completed. And if you can see the closing time, it shows you a running transaction for this. And this is ideal for the management to look at different tasks that are going on. This is the purchase work order from the company that sent it over with their own PO. And you also have your own invoice or work order number that you use to track it internally. And we'll talk about that when we get back to the other screens. You have the date, the current date of the actual transaction for the work order when it was created. This will take you to the actual work order that we're working with. So you can see the actual work order. We'll cover that separately. The company that and the ID for the company where this is actually being worked on. So you can see that. And then you can see the work order number here, 1 through the number of. And this is where each work order is available for you to go and actually look at it based on the number that that work order has on. Now some of these fields, again, are not supposed to be edited. In this case, the work order, you can edit it for one cause or another, so I left it unlocked, but you should not be changing them. They should be sequential. As they're created, you should be putting in the numbers sequentially as far as work orders are concerned. Let's go ahead and go back to the customer information. Now what we've done in our recap, we looked at equipment assignment. We took a look at that. We went to the equipment status and worked on that and looked at that portal. We looked at the service and equipment. We looked at the work order history. We looked at the service work order itself showing labor and materials. In this case, labor performed. And in this case, the last one is the plan where you can actually schedule all of this stuff out into the future or for the current period of time. And this sets up so that you go back to the calendar with this information and update the calendar as appropriate for either pickup, delivery, or actual service, or things that are to be done as events on the main calendar. Okay, now we've completed quite a bit of information in here, and we've covered a lot of things. The next thing we're going to be looking at is to go, actually we will be showing this information and how it is used, but we're also going to be explaining a little bit more about the inventory so you can see how it ties together. And I'll kind of preamble that by telling you the first thing you always do is create the information for the customer. The next thing you do is add all of the information that's supporting that customer as far as his equipment assignment and equipment for service if it's coming in for the service portal. The next thing you're going to be doing is make sure that you have the inventory or items purchased that you need to purchase from the vendors that you need to get them from, and any expenses that are related to expenses that are over and above things you're going to be charging the client. That mean you have to drive it down to a service shop where you're not going to charge the client to take it to a location to say get that starter rebuilt. You're only going to charge him for the labor of the actual work that you're working on. And these are expenses that you may pay out of pocket for mileage, or there may be just about anything else that is related to that as far as expenses for doing shop work. For example, if it's related to repairing a piece of equipment or buying a part for a piece of equipment that is standard stuff that you're using in the shop, yet it needs to be done and used in the actual process of doing the service. Those are things that you're not going to charge a client for unless it's a very specific item that is only used on one of his vehicles and is required only for that vehicle. Then you should charge him for it. And that would be part of a material item in the inventory that would you be using and buying just to cover that particular process. Now, you create customer information first, then you create the inventory information as well as the equipment itself. Those are the major things that you need to do. And then as required, you add all the particular purchase items for equipment that you're going to be using in parts, sub-assemblies, and so forth. And then we'll get back down to how these particular tabs that we're talking about over here are used to invoice and draw payment out of the client, and then the other data that is worked in process with that as far as the bookkeeping of the information for all the charges and everything for that client. Okay, so now that we've completed this information and we've covered pretty much all of this, we're going to be coming back next and looking at the tabs and working with the inventory system.